if you lower the price without removing something for the deal or getting something in exchange from the consumer, you've lost all credibility. Because why didn't you give them the lower price to start? You have to get that validation for a discount before you give a discount. Dropping the price, giving them something for free out of the blue is not going to get you the sale. If you're saying, if you sign today and give me this credit card, we can do 6 months free in your first year or over your first 2 years, well, that's exchange for the deposit.
Hey, welcome to Keep What You Earn, and today's guest, I brought Jason, my husband. Jason, say hi to everyone listening to the podcast.
Hi, all you listeners, especially those of you in Namibia. Chart topper here.
Yeah, exactly. What he's talking about is we actually started charting in multiple countries, and we actually hit number 1 in Namibia at one point, which is kind of a fun
It's on my bucket list of places to go.
So, Jason, introduce yourself to everyone and tell us a little bit about you.
So, I'm Jason Weinstein, obviously. I've had my own business, Budget Dry Waterproofing, for a little over 15 years now. I've got 2 other businesses on top of that here. And ironically, I never wanted to own my own business. I kind of came into this all by accident. I was working for a waterproofing company in New York City. I was 21 years old, fresh out of college, graduated early, and in a year I learned how not to run a business. When I saw how poorly they treated their customers and they treated their employees even worse and still were profitable, I said there's got to be another way. And I jumped in the deep end, maxing out my credit cards and bootstrap financing this. And now we're, as I said, 15 years, 26 employees currently, and over 40 million in gross sales.
Wow. And how old were you when you left and started your own company?
22.
Wow. So, not having started a business before, bootstrapping it and everything, I know that you've actually watched me grow in the past couple of years, and you started your business, I think we have to remind folks, when, you couldn't hop on Instagram and start a business. You couldn't necessarily, bootstrap online as fast as, say, I did. And that's one thing that I think we forget all the time.
I had to spend several $100,000 a year in Yellow Page advertising, if you remember what those things were.
Yep.
And now they don't even exist. But back then, that's what you had to do, and you had a lead up time. You had to launch in time for the book publish date and get your ads in and pay them. So you had to have the business to afford the ad, and have this cycle there, and direct mail, again, long lead up cycles. You couldn't just hop on a computer and make the phone ring with business.
Yeah, and you started very young working, right? Which is where you learned a lot of the skills that you implemented when you started your business.
Yes, I started working when I was about 5. My father, or even younger, my father was in the car business, would say, Jason, when does the sale begin? And I'd answer, when the customer says no. Because until you hear a no, you're just an order taker. You're working a fast food counter. You're not a salesperson. So the sale begins once you get an objection. By 10, I was sweeping car lots. By 12, I was the runner bringing cars into emissions and DMV. I didn't have a driver's license, but they knew me by name. By 16, I was a full-time salesperson. I started my first big business at 17 with a moving company and 5 employees. By accident, I kind of fell into that one too. And as I went through college, I saw people, and I was supposed to be an attorney. I was supposed to go into labor law. And I studied entrepreneurship and labor relations at McGill University in Montreal. And saw everyone fighting for the consulting jobs, the consulting internships, the accounting programs. And I just said, I can't see myself working for 20 years to try and get a view in my cubicle. And I said, there's got to be some other way to put this knowledge and education to work. And he said, well, I'm supposed to be negotiating union agreements and contracts. Why don't I try negotiating subcontractor agreements and force my way into the construction business that way? I had no construction background.
Wow. So what would you, excuse me, what would you attribute your ability to generate sales to in terms of skills you learned or experiences? Like, where did that come from?
When you're taught sales in an institutional environment, again, car sales back when were very institutionalized. You had a process. You had professional salespeople. Nowadays, unfortunately, you don't have the same professionalism in the sales force. Back then, you had to beat the pavement, work the phones, call the yellow pages, white pages, just dial for dollars, as we called it. Every lead that you had to treat as buy or die. People coming in to buy a car, if they needed a car, in most cases, there was a reason they were shopping. It wasn't because they weren't interested in something, and they go through the process, especially look at a used car. They're there for a reason. They're going to buy a car from you or from somebody else. Or, the idea is more so with waterproofing, we look at it as they're going to buy, they're going to ignore the problem, or they're going to sell the home. Still had a few die, unfortunately, that brings validity to the buy or die mentality. But there's only a few finite outcomes. And when you have just a few finite outcomes, it's a lot easier than, say, counting cards and playing blackjack. And you can work with it and force the resolutions that you want.
Okay. So sales in general, I think a lot of folks struggle with and don't have the skills or don't have the experience or haven't really watered that plant in terms of their skill set. Do you think anyone can learn how to sell?
Yes. As long as you have confidence in yourself, you can sell. People think sales is smooth talking or forcing somebody into a resolution they don't want. You're conning them, as a lot of times is the idea of a salesperson. They pull the fast one, and that's not what sales is. Sales is listening. It's asking questions. It's getting to the root of the problem, and in most cases, alleviating pain. Now, people think, the more painful it is, the easier the sale. That's not always the case. In my business, the basement waterproofing world, you think, working with a shop vac, that's how I grew up, with a shop vac and a sump pump and keeping the basement dry on a heavy rainstorm late at night or early in the morning, not sleeping and still going to school the next day. That's painful. It is, but parting with the money is more painful for some people, or they haven't experienced it enough times so that you can't alleviate pain until you remind a person of it. Again, I bring back my days in the car business. The pain sometimes is not having a car and being dependent on a ride. Again, back before you had Uber and other options to get you from point A to point B. Or the pain of the car constantly breaking down, the unexpected repair bills that went with an older vehicle. But you have to look at it as, what are you selling and how does that actually affect the person that you're engaging with? And if you can understand their pain points, and the pain point doesn't have to be physically painful. It doesn't have to be, my back is killing from the mopping up this water. It could be as, I don't think I look good with this haircut. But that's the pain to them. And as long as you're confident that your product can alleviate that pain, you can sell. But you have to have a regimented, consistent process to do so. You can't just wing it. You have to know what you're doing and where you're taking the interaction.
And why do you think it's so essential to have such a process, even if you're naturally skilled at selling and think, oh, well, I'm closing most of the deals that are brought to the table, so I must be good at selling, even if they don't have a process? What would you say in terms of advice or why they should have a framework or a structure to it?
Well, there's 2 points there. If you're selling everything, then we'll talk about your pricing, because there's obviously something amiss there. But you have to have a process, even if you're the world's greatest salesperson, so you remember what you've covered and what you've left out. If there's something in the implementation that the customer needs to be made aware of or be prepared for, if you have a process, you can cover that. Versus after you sell it, well, why aren't we live today? What do you mean there's a delay? Well, I thought I told you, or I swore I told you it was going to be 6 weeks to get you up and running. No, you didn't. Now you're in a battle with your new customer, and that's not a successful place to be. So if you have a process, even if you're the world's greatest salesperson, you're going to know that you've covered everything. But you need a process to also make it scalable. You don't want to be the person doing this all every day. Or if you are, I mean, what happens when you go away? You get sick. What happens if you get slammed with demand? You need to be able to replicate and train, but you can't train if you don't have a process.
Yeah. And what would you say are your best tips to get people to follow the process, right? Because not only do you need a process, you need it implemented consistently.
So think of a process, I mean, that you call it a sales pitch. Think of baseball or softball if you played that. A pitcher will always have the same routine. Yes, they change it slightly. They shorten it when a person's on base. But the mechanics of delivering the ball are the same. A pitcher doesn't throw righty to one batter, lefty to the next, and underhand to the third. You have to be consistent. So you have to start off with the same message every time. With our pitch, we really emphasize the size of the business. We show the picture with all the vehicles parked out front of our building, because we want to show we're not 2 guys in an unbranded pickup truck coming to do the work. We're a real team. And that alone will sell the jobs. But from there, we take it further. So you always want to get into credentialing, a bit about yourself, and then a bit about your products, and then a bit about the process. People are going to buy from you first, the company second, and the price third. If you try and lead with the price, you've built no value. If you try and lead with the company, you've built no trust in yourself. So you have to sell yourself. And that's not make up fake rapport stories based on, oh, you see, you like fishing. I like to fish too, when you've never held a rod in your hand. That happens constantly in my business. People think they have to make up stories, that's how they're going to win over the customer. And that's not. It's about being genuine. It's about being confident in yourself and, in part, knowing your product, knowing how that's going to work for the customer. You don't need to be a know-it-all. You don't have to have every answer. You can figure it out on the fly. But you have to be confident in who you are, and also confident in that the company is going to deliver, the products are going to deliver for the customer. And that will automatically build confidence in the price, both to yourself and to the consumer.
Okay. So you're saying basically build trust, and then we'll make the price work, right? Because people will pay more for someone they trust to do the work.
Yeah, and there are different philosophies there of building the ticket, building the price. Some schools of thought are you really push the pain points, put the customer back into that mindset of the pain situation. And the more you make them feel the pain, the easier it is to sell your solution because it's alleviating that pain. Other beliefs are you don't talk price. You flat out sell your services and the price is what it is. And they're going to build and understand the value in your service, or they're not. But if you've done your job, you've shown them the value, and they have to put the dollar sign themselves to that. So, and there's a range in between. We are kind of more in the middle with our business, but price is the last thing. Now, it's probably the most common objection of why somebody doesn't move forward. And you'll hear all sorts of excuses until you get to that objection. But you can't just stop at the first no. Because again, as I said, that's when the sale begins.
I like that you say that because a lot of topics come up online about, handling objections and how to communicate with the prospect. So you kind of hit on that there. Where do you think that most salespeople kind of go off course, where they don't close? What would you say are the biggest mistakes they make?
Not asking for the business. You have to repeatedly ask. It's everything from, so when were you thinking about getting this done? Or what's your timeline on this project? To have you set a budget for this? Because you're trying to focus it back towards money. And then in our business, we ask, how do you want to take care of this? Cash, check, credit cards. We have 6 months same as cash financing, 6.99%. Which one's going to work best for you? You really want to push with a forced choice when you can to narrow down the outcomes. But you have to keep asking and asking and asking. People hear a no. They say, okay, great, thank you for your time, and pack up their stuff and leave. When you hear your first no, you really need to push further to say, why? Why not today? It could be as brazen if price wasn't even a factor. What would keep you from doing this work today? And if you hear, well, there's nothing, well, then you 100% know the issue is budget. But you have to work to the budget and see why it doesn't work. Did you not build enough value for the price? Or are there other factors? Are they getting another estimate and have that meeting set up, and you need to have a set follow-up time? And then the other thing that happens is salespeople are notoriously bad with paperwork and follow-up. So having a system to do the follow-up, to touch base with people on prescribed dates, will also bring in business.
Perfect. I got this advice a long time ago too, that when you're selling, that before you jump to discounting your price to meet the customer, to their budget, it's really about either communicating the value or adding something of value into the price before you lower the price. What's your opinion on that advice?
If you lower the price without removing something for the deal or getting something in exchange from the consumer, you've lost all credibility. Because why didn't you give them the lower price to start?
Yeah.
And you need to have, and again, this is where having a replicable process comes into play, so you can have multiple salespeople, so you can have a boss to call. Even if you're the boss, call somebody else. You have to get that validation for a discount before you give a discount. So just dropping the price, giving them something for free out of the blue is not going to get you the sale. If you're saying, if you sign today and give me this credit card, we can do 6 months free in your first year or over your first 2 years, well, that's exchange for the deposit.
Right.
But you can't just drop your price and sit there because you've lost all credibility.
That actually happened to me recently when I subscribed to something. I said no, and then they said, well, what if we could do it for this price? And I said, if you could do it for that price, why wasn't that the quote?
Yeah. And that comes to the I'm not saying I can, but if I can get this to X dollars or X dollars per month, is there anything else preventing you from going forward today? And when you hear, nope, that's the only thing. Okay, let me call. And now, if I'm going to get my boss on the phone, if he can or she can make this work, you have your credit card ready? You'll give that to me now? Okay, I'll hold this. If I get it, we'll move forward and make the phone call. But you can't ask for a discount until you have a commitment.
Yeah. And I wouldn't do it too soon in the process either, where you don't let them come forward. Because what a lot of people make in terms of a mistake is they keep talking and they assume that price is the objection. So they start offering lower prices, or they start kind of, I don't know, reacting instinctively by trying to lower the price to convince them. And what you're saying is that should only really come up when you've identified and isolated that as the objection.
You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them proportionally.
I love that. Where did you hear that?
That's an old sales adage.
Ah.
You need to listen to the customer more than they need to hear you.
So 2/3 to 3/4 of the call or the meeting should be them.
Yes. And again, when you're giving a sales presentation, you shouldn't, in most cases, come up with a brand new sales pitch for every client either. Because you're selling yourself and the company first and foremost. So between those two, only a small portion is the product, and maybe you have a different product menu for different consumers. We have a whole gamut of products that we sell. Everything is in our slide deck. The reps will see how much time they need to allocate per slide, but everything is in our slide deck already. We have one presentation to use. We have one script to follow, but we don't spend the time of trying to reinvent the wheel at every call. You want consistent results, and you're not going to get those unless you have a consistent process. Salespeople, lead sources, pricing, everything you do needs to be constantly monitored and evaluated, but you need consistency across them all to do that accurately.
So another aspect of it is, and I've seen your pitch decks and everything, you've let me see them, and when I was developing my process, you gave me a lot of help with that by looking at yours. And one of the things I noticed is that you do bring up competition, but in a very subtle way, almost indirectly.
I think we're a little more than indirect. We actually label them and show.
Yeah.
But we're not talking negative. All our competition's great. They're great companies. They're great marketers. They're great on YouTube. We just think we have a better product, or we have a better process, or we have a better team. And we say those, and that's what we say. We never talk negative. When you start talking negative about your competition, you lose the customer.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, well, you want to differentiate yourself, but how do you do that without shaming your competition or coming across as, not taking the high road?
Well, again, you bring it back to your product. Mm-hmm. You want to sell your product. You want to sell the value add. So you just come back to that.
Okay. So, Jason, I love having you on to talk about this because you have so many good pieces of advice via your dad and all the people who have taught you. If someone, actually, I'm going to ask you this question just to think about, is if you in 2022 were to start Budget Drive from scratch again.
Wouldn't do it. I would find
you wouldn't.
There are different services that I would do.
Right, but let's just for the sake of the hypothetical, if you were to start a business from, let's say any business from scratch in 2022, what's the first thing you would do as you got started?
Shop my competition. Understand what else is in the market, what the price points are, and how they're selling it, so you can be different.
Yeah, I like that. And, then you understand more of the messaging, the pain points, kind of a shortcut to see how they're doing it.
And you also understand where they're cutting corners and where they're not developing people. And we make every one of our salespeople shop the competition when they start, so that you know who you're fighting against. Because every day is a fight. There's a finite number of people in the market, and you want to walk out ahead.
I like that. That's a new take on it. I like that a lot. Any parting words of advice for our listeners when it comes to sales?
Anybody can be a salesperson. Just be confident in yourself.
I love that. Thank you. And thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate having you on. We're going to have you back again if you're interested. If you'll accept the invitation.
All right. See what countries you're trending in then.
Yeah, we're here at Keep What You Earn, and we're trending in. Gosh, where are we trending? Namibia. We got number 1 in Namibia.
You were in Canada. Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Taiwan.
I think Taiwan at some point.
As well, because you asked me if they had Thai food.
I did not have Thailand on there, unfortunately. I want an excuse to go to these places and deduct it. Say I have a number 1 podcast there. Can we go? But yeah, it's been such a fun ride, and thank you for supporting me. And for those of you listening who are enjoying the improved audio quality, you have this guy to thank for it. His great Christmas present.
That and my days working as a roadie.
Yeah, exactly. We'll tell that story another day. All right. Well, thanks, Jason, for being on, and thank you all for listening. We'll see you soon.